again, thank you everybody. Really appreciate you altering your schedule to. I know you usually do it on, I think it was the third Tuesday or whatever, and we weren't able to be a part of this. I was traveling last week, so great to be able to be here with you now. My name is Jeff Zigler, and I have been with RCS and its earlier identities, if you will, since 2006. And prior to that, was in engineering in Wisconsin at several different sites, a site in Illinois. So I definitely have my roots in the engineering side of the world, and I'm an SBE member for Chapter 24 in Madison, and have been for decades, I'm sure. But really a pleasure to be able to talk with nuts and bolts with you guys, and I've got a couple pieces here. I don't know how many are familiar with our products, but we do. We offer several products as RCS. Everything from scheduling, be it music scheduling with our G selector and selector lines. We offer traffic scheduling now with Airwaves and our Acquira line. Acquira is the newcomer. Airwaves was out for a little while, primarily internationally, the application there. We have a news product a lot of people don't realize, RCS News, that allows you to integrate for your news talks, be able to wire monitor, capture, produce, and feed the automation systems with that. A lot of good stuff, and then of course, like I said, the automation products, with our latest being Zeta, and earlier iterations being NextGen, which I think there's an awful lot of NextGen here in Minneapolis, the area, and even prior to that, some CFS and Master Control. Those were all RCS and in earlier days called Profit System Products. The two companies merged back in 2006 and took the name RCS. RCS probably had a better global footprint than what Profit did at the time, so we took that for global recognition. But it's still the same guys. We run our world headquarters is in White Plains, New York, and then we have a software development headquarters in Ogallala, Nebraska. So if you've ever driven west on I-80 through Nebraska, you've definitely passed Ogallala. And don't blink. Today I'd like to talk about a couple things that will tie into some of our old products, but primarily with the new products on behalf of Zcasting and site replication. What I mean by that, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, but Zcasting is how we tie in location to location. Now, the locations can be relative. It could be different city markets. It could even be in the same market and maybe different studios. So if I have a mall and I have a main site, those are two different sites, but we can tie them together with resources that we call Zcasting now. It used to be called WAN casting with NextGen. Very similar functionality and implementation scheme. Site replication is kind of a new beast that is unique to Zeta, and I really like the twist it's brought to the table, and I'll go over some of the unique things about this. But we can use this technology for not even just linking the sites, but almost, I guess, equally important, if not perhaps more. Since I'm talking to an engineering crowd, I can probably confidently say more. The ability to create offsite backups, which can be worth their weight in gold when you have power outages, when you have disasters. We need to be able to get access to that information, or be able to run remotely at the drop of a hat. And site rep really is kind of a neat twist. It also brings in a whole new realm of possibilities for intra-company connections between locations, and I'll get into this a little bit more. And then finally, I'll just kind of cover some new features coming to our Zeta product, which I tend to be an automation specialist. I don't do a lot with picking the songs and such like that. You wouldn't want to hear the stuff actually, you've heard all. I'm a classic rocker, so you know all the songs I'd pick. But we'll kind of go through this and I'll just show you, just so you have some knowledge of what's Zeta doing in 2018, what's planned on the roadmap, because you're gonna get to find out about features that haven't been released yet. So kind of have the inside track. So let's see here. So we'll start off with the legacy stuff that I think some people here are deploying. I know the IHM boys are using WAN casting for interconnecting with other IHM locations, and the comparable model in Zeta is Z casting, and it does have a new name, not just because it's part of Zeta, but it actually has some new functionality. We'll get into that here in a second. But traditionally speaking, and this is, I think, this also, there's other wide orbit and others have kind of similar approaches to how do I get data from here to there. Now, if the there is an offsite backup, if the there is a second studio, doesn't really matter. It's just how am I interconnecting stuff. And the traditional model today is a push architecture where we say, okay, here's a song, here's a log here, whatever, we'll throw it over that wall, and hopefully the other side catches it, ingests it in, and likewise the other side can throw something back over to site B, site A. So we can have site A pushing to site B pushing to site A. The catch, and this is why I use the brick wall, kind of the international symbol for firewall. It doesn't mean a firewall in this case, but the point is, site B doesn't exactly really know what's at site A, and site A doesn't really know what's at site. We know we threw it to them. We hope they got it. We can sometimes get an error back if they got it or if they didn't get it, but we really don't know what's in site B. So it becomes a bit of a management issue, making sure is how valid is that offsite backup? How did the most critical information get there first, get there in time? These are the considerations that we had to work with in the WAN casting and Z casting models, and to be honest, somewhat a limitation when we get to the site replication part, that when we kind of reinvented things a little bit to be able to operate better. And one of the other situations here is because of this, when you create a new piece of production at site A or site B for the other site, you're loading it into your site even though you may not need it. And then I have to package it up and shoot it over the wall and hope like heck they got it. And that we cover here in this in the next slide. So you can see what we do is we take the metadata, which I've used the information sign, and the waveform. We package that all up nicely because we want it to travel together, because if we do them separately, we're kind of hoping that the other made it. You know, you could get one without the other, and that would be a very bad scenario. So we've got an orphaned wave file, or I've got metadata and no audio. It would not be a good situation at all. Put that all in a package and lob that over to site B, and then site B takes that package and breaks it apart, and we'll ingest it into the database. Hopefully, that's the goal anyway. And more often than not, it does. I mean, without a doubt, you know, we've come a long way, and it is a very reliable thing. But stuff can happen, and the catch with this is having that blind wall makes it really a challenge to feel 100% confident that yes, all this stuff really made it there, because I can't easily look at what's in B. I can look at what I've sent, I can even get a report, but I don't really know what's in B. So if we take a look here at the next slide, this, because of these limitations, with the architecture having the wall there, so we really can't see site to site, there's some benefit to that too in application. So for instance, if we take a look at how is WAN casting and Z casting being deployed, where does it fit really well? Well, it certainly can fit very well, and it's done very well in an iHeart to iHeart environment. So if I want to send stuff from Minneapolis to Madison or to LA, as long as it's all iHeart, great, certainly works dandy with that. We can even work with remote production studios or remote studios. You can set up a push, and again, it's a blind push, but it still push works well, and it also works pretty well with a home user. So, the reason it works well for a home user, say a home voice tracker, somebody set up a studio in their basement, and they want to lay tracks for the FM or what, you know, country, what, you know, pick your station. That's good, but we only want them to have so much access and so much liability with that connection, because you don't want a home voice tracker taking your station off the air because they didn't do something, or they did something, one or the other. And so having that block there that's they can't really see everything in the database, limits how much they could do to you. And it also provides a degree of isolation. In the final example down the bottom here, where I have an entity like Premier that's a radio network and has to distribute to IHM, which happens to be an owner, but they also has to feed perhaps an external party like Sirius XM. That works because, again, we have the brick wall there to kind of stop database A from seeing everything in database B other than what we've lobbed back and forth and know that they should have or have they lobbed to us. Having that isolation really makes it an acceptable model for inter-company linking. I don't know how many are doing. I know there are a few. I know Premier does do it, and there's I believe a few other networks, but primarily it's been network level interconnections that have been doing this. And I don't know that we've seen it at the station level. Conceivably, Town Square, I think they have WAN casting deployed, possibly that they could WAN cast to IHM if they wanted to components. I don't know that it happens, but it's certainly possible, and we have some control over there because they can't see each other's full databases. We can only see what we've logged. Talking between the legacy WAN casting, which is the next gen model, and Zeta, there's a remarkable degree of similarity where they're both designed to work across station ownership groups. So again, just like I said, mentioned here with Premier, and could be any Cumulus, whoever, other entity, it's safe to send stuff because we're just lobbing. Can't really see the database. Push-driven architecture, both Zcast and WANcast are push-driven. And then we can throttle communications. This becomes real key when we're talking about backup architectures, so that maybe I've got a transmitter site that doesn't have, because it's out in the middle of nowhere, I don't have access to the same amount of throughput that I might have in the heart of Minneapolis here. So I need to be able to throttle the communications to that site and to not overwhelm it. Or worse yet, let you have Minneapolis throw so much so fast that it ends up getting bottlenecked and eventually packets get dropped and lost because it's timed out, the communications link. So we can throttle on a per connection basis there. And they're both designed to move component level stuff, voice tracks, music, song, or commercials. We can, of course, do log components too, back and forth. Where WAN casting has or where Zcast differs from WAN casting a bit, as I mentioned before about this whole packet thing, is like, well, what happens if the package gets lost along the way? We don't really have a dandy way in next gen other than requesting a report saying, hey, tell me all the stuff you got. We can compare it to all the stuff I sent, and we'll figure out if there's a difference there. With Zcast, we actually did close that loop. So now as the sending site, I get a confirmation back that the receiving site got it. I can see the rate at which it transferred, when it should be available for play. I can see all that from the sending site. So that was a pretty big step forward for us. And then transportation prioritization. One of the things I alluded to earlier too was if I have maybe a library of songs, maybe a Christmas library or whatever, things I don't need all the time, but I might want to have it back up so that if I lost it, I wouldn't want to reload it either, or I wouldn't have to rip everything in. I can say, go ahead and back all this up to the transmitter site, but what if now somebody cuts a voice track that's going to air in a couple hours? Well, I certainly don't want that to wait till the rest of the library transfers. So we can now prioritize based on log air date with Zcasting, and that adds a nice twist into the delivery mechanism. Now, take a look at what site rep brings into the place. I tried really hard to think of a picture to do a nice site rep, and everything from, let me draw a database that spans the two, but then that kind of implies it's a database in the cloud, which it really isn't that. So a window is the closest thing I could get. The sites can see each other. We still are lobbing, but there's another twist. We can now pull, because I can now see the other site. I can now know from either end what I have, what they have, and what the delta is. And if I need to fix that delta, and we'll go into more detail on that. And that's a pretty big change. What that brings to the table is the feeling of a virtualized database that's in the cloud. It really isn't that way. It's really discrete databases that are cloned across multiple locations. But you have that feeling of, if I am in Red Wing and I enter a spot into the system, I can see also, if I have the rights to, I can see KDWB. I can see whatever calls that happen to be in the bigger picture, in site-wide, if I have the rights to. Not every, an employee who only programs to a station in Red Wing would only see their stations. However, as maybe a corporate engineer or a corporate entity, I want to go in and I want to be able to see all stations. You can do that from anywhere. Very powerful. And looking at that now, so architecturally speaking, we can still push information from A to B, and likewise B to A. There's synchronization agents that run, and the biggest thing that they're worrying about is checking to make sure, okay, yep, is the site A database, site B database metadata the same? If the metadata is the same, do I have all the things that are scheduled for me to play immediately coming up? If I don't, here's the key. Go get them from the other site. So now it becomes a push-pull architecture. So I can land it into the virtual database at Red Wing or wherever, and Minneapolis can know, oh, they provided me something that I need, let me go get that from them. The reason that really takes it kind of adds a whole new twist is, let's say it's something that isn't on the log. Maybe it's a production element. Maybe it's a weird applause, well, not applause track, a sound effect of some nature, whatever. And I knew that they had this resource in Red Wing, or I didn't even know. I wanted to browse. What do they got over there? I can go through and browse. Oh, I like that. Let me get that. And I can go pull it from them. It really brings some cool features to this. And the other thing that I'll get into in a second is, what's the tripping mechanism? How does this actually happen? Because you can get the idea of browsing. I can look at a library and say, oh, I like that. Let me get that. But there's another way through assignment. For if I say, well, this is something. Here's this particular song format, and I know that all my rocks are going to need it. I can assign it to those, and then all the respective rock stations will go pull that song from where it was loaded, pull a copy. Breaking down, here's the way that actually functions. We separated, instead of packetizing the metadata, we separated the metadata so that's the push. That's how the syncing agents can now know what they need. Then the syncing agents can go get what they need and make sure it's in the system properly. So Site A sends a new ad down to Site B. Site B says, yep, let me load that in. Got it in my database now, it's cool. And I see that, by the way, that's been assigned for playability at Site B. I'll need a copy of that. Gets the audio file for that, brings it into Site B. If we looked at it more of on a map grid, let's take another sites A, B, and C, where I've got 3 different formats, and 3 of which are at one site, 2 of which are at 2 others, where I can have my talk format, or actually I've got all 3 at Site A. Site B only has talk and classic rock, and Site C has only classic rock and country. I can add a country song at Site C, and because I've designated it as saying, hey, this is available as part of the country library, it'll replicate back to Site A, and vice versa if A adds something. This kind of gets you a twofold benefit, and that is, not only are we basing this on assignment, I didn't have to knowingly push to Site A, I just simply made it available for country, and then because the country format, Site A has the country format, it could know to go get that. But I can also now have some dynamic abilities on behalf of my database size. And what I mean by that is not so much the actual metadata, but I'm talking the audio content store. So if I had a country transmitter that I wanted to, or a transmitter site for my country station, and I only wanted to back up the country there, but I've got a whole array of formats, I can say, transmitter, you only back up the things that are assigned to the country format or this particular set of call letters, and it will only pull those. That way now it can truly be, even though my database could be, I don't know, a dozen terabytes in size, I've only got a 500 gig drive out there sitting on a machine at the transmitter site, because boy, if it comes to that, yeah, I guess we'll play songs from the transmitter, but I really only, I don't want to put a 10 terabyte storage system at my transmitter site. I don't need to put a 10 terabyte storage system at my transmitter site. I can still have a reliable backup for my country format and have all the components it needs, but be able to scale it to something that's practical at different locations. So every location is sizable because of this architecture. Assignment-wise, this. If you had to visualize what it is, here it is. I've got Start Me Up as an example, where that's only going to be available to my rock stations, and you see it's not going to go to, it's not going to be available to my other sites or my other stations. So it would never have. Well, I guess it would actually, it's probably not the best example. Now I look at it, going, it would actually live at all sites because all the sites had a rock station. But if it were a talk program, it wouldn't necessarily ever end up at Site C unless I purposely told it, which you can do. Say, Site C, I want you to back up everything. I can just say, assign you to all formats, go ahead and back up everything, if that's what I was trying to create. But if I didn't do that, it's not going to have that format. So take something like a McDonald's spot now, and I do want that to go everywhere, because everywhere could very practically need that. I can just simply say send to everywhere. It's playable by every station everywhere, and make it go everywhere, because that one actually pays the bill. Start Me Up, nice to hear, but it doesn't pay the bill. Because of this, the application model is a little bit different. It still works really well for intra-company connections. Much like how we're traditionally using WAN casting now, or even the previous Z casting model. And we can use it for studio locations. So if you had a mall studio, again, that scenario where I wanted to, I'm going to have maybe a day part, the morning show broadcast from the mall or something, I don't know. I can duplicate the format audio out there and be able to make sure that site's got all the information it needs to source. And the transmitter side, I could simply throw out just the format that it needs. Where we run into a hole here is intra-company, where if I want, or I'm sorry, inter-company, because this is now a great degree of data sharing. You probably would not want to use this in a Premiere to Sirius XM model, because they're totally different companies. They're at least today. I don't know if anybody's read the trades, but the metadata may not be consistent. So for instance, you take somebody like IHM, where they very much standardized. Here's a numbering schema that we're going to use in markets, and yeah, the Start Me Up is going to be song number 97821 or something, and it can be 97821 everywhere. That's just fine. You're not going to get two companies to agree to that, so it really doesn't fit well for inter-company connections. However, we do have a model that will work for that for Zeta, because again, site rep is just a Zeta feature, and it is our Zeta to go model, which is a browser-based model. It typically was intended for voice track and remote use. It provides limited access via HTML5 from a browser, and you can give as much data accessibility as you want. You can limit people from adding and deleting audio and such, but it would be a methodology that may be able to be applicable for inter-company, but again, site rep really it is not doesn't have a good application in inter-company connections. It really is designed for living within the company, but in that application, it way outperforms what Zcast and WANcast can do. Similarities between Zcasting and site rep are a few. We still throttle, of course, because the interconnection possibilities are still have the same limits. Perhaps if you have a transmitter site that's got limited connectivity. We don't want to overwhelm that and backlog traffic and stuff. And we also, they're both designed to move the same things. We're designed to move spots, logs, and commercials, or music, what have you, elemental levels. However, the differences are where it's really unique, or what really stands out. Site rep being a push-pull thing. Again, I'm not having to think from the sending site always. That's the gotcha. Is you kind of always have to think from the sending site with a traditional push approach. You can now do pull on demand, and that's big for if I want to use hotkeys and somebody's got a resource that I need in another market and I have access to it. Man, that's handy. That's really, really handy. We can create a United Database field, which is certainly nice at the corporate level. Programming-wise, it's imagine being able to walk in with your same login to another market and see all your same rights to that data. That's huge. Designed to excuse me, replicate users' rights and stuff. That's important, because now that we've shared this additional data, we want to make sure that you can't shoot yourself in the foot very much. And so we replicate, of course, the users' user rights, but our hotkey profiles and stuff. So if I'm a jock and today I'm doing my show in Minneapolis, but tomorrow I'm doing my show someplace else and I'm on the site rep table, I can have all my same resources again. Transportation prioritization by air schedule. That's one of the neat twists now, is we can, if we have a voice track or whatever, I don't care what, maybe it's a spot, doesn't really matter, but it's something that's been scheduled in the log, we know to look. Say, okay, here's all the stuff we have to move. I know to look to when does this guy go on the air, and be able to make sure he gets there in time, and I can confirm that he got there in time with the site rep model. And again, touching back, configurable amount of levels of synchronization. This has to do with, I want to back up these pieces at this site, maybe everything at that site, and it allows you to scale your replication model. That's really the kind of the new tweaks to Zeta with the site replication components. And any questions on that? Otherwise, the only other pieces I have here are just some kind of a quick overview of some upcoming features that are new to Zeta. So anybody got any questions on the site rep stuff? Yell them out.
Pretty straightforward.
I either bored you all, or can't believe I was that thorough. Maybe so. Anyway, then cool. We're really almost wrapped up here, and
we got a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Disaster recovery.
Yes.
Through the replication system, can that replicate just as much bad data as it does good?
Well, that's a good question. So let's say I do have a piece of audio. If I've mistagged the piece of, I dubbed in "Start Me Up," but I labeled it "Feel Like Making Love." You're right, it could. That's true.
Or what about just hiccup in the connection? I've got bad audio now.
Well,
checks against that?
It does. We do a checksum on both the metadata and the audio componentry. So yeah, we use I think MD5 for checking to make sure the data is valid and correct, and we're comparing the attributes within the peak levels. We look at all that. So it would be hard for the audio to be corrupt, but could I abuse the system and load the wrong song and misidentify? Absolutely, you could, if you had the rights to do so. A lot of people, we run into this. Sirius XM uses our stuff. In fact, Sirius XM has moved from next gen to Zeta for a little over half their channels now. They're actually a split platform. It's kind of odd, but they have a workflow now that even if you create something, it doesn't get all the way onto the air until they have sign-off people to validate, yes, this is that song. Yes, it's been segued properly. All the metadata points have been entered properly. So they kind of do a workflow limit on that. But yeah, if you have the rights and you don't have a QC step or whatever in the process, then absolutely, it'll replicate whatever's there. If data going bad along the way, what's really good about the site rep is it can actually catch it, because it is a closed loop system. It's a push-pull. So if something didn't match, it can go pull it again. So here's some cool stuff coming up in version this year, version 4.3 and later. We've got a new, it sounds boring, but it's kind of cool. We always had the little speaker audition thing where you can, much like almost any app, if you want to hear something, click on the speaker. We now create a full module around that. So when you open an Audition, we actually have a module for it. You see the waveform, and you can see the metadata points with that waveform. We can we can provide you all of the I guess the monitoring options. Say if I wanted to, if you hit the speaker, it would always start playing from the beginning. But what if you didn't? What if you always wanted it to start, I want to hear the out cues? You can select it, or you can make it your default. Say, I only want to hear out cues when I go into Audition. And it looks like that. We have a second little tool called the microbar, not to be confused with the mini bar, which is in your hotel. The microbar lives up along the top banner strip, just up on the side. So anything you click on, that comes up and loads up, and you can see it. I've got a song there, and it just happens. Hey, if I hit play up there, it's going to provide it out my Audition output, which, by the way, I can also trigger. I don't know that anybody does this anymore, but it used to be a big thing. You can also trigger by GPI. So if you did a fader cue, you can actually have it pop the window up to listen to something, which I think is neat. I just don't know anybody doing that anymore. It was kind of a cool old thing we did with CDs and stuff. And you can see all the metadata marks. You see the blue is a hook point there, the kind of in the middle left hand side there, and all the different metadata points. You can see the fade down audio at the yellow mark at the end there. Reconciling hotkeys, stacks, and G selector with G selector, or actually other music schedulers too. One of the neat things, we tend to think of hotkeys as being I do anyway, as being kind of an asynchronous element. It's something that isn't in the log for a reason, because I didn't want to schedule it. It's something that the talent decided they wanted to do. But what if that's not the case? What if there is something? What if talent threw a spot there, you had to get on the air, instead of putting the log, you just played it from the hotkey? Well, then what? How do you know it aired? How do you count on this? Well, we actually built a way to track that, so that if you want to regularly use hotkeys, stacks, which is nothing more than like a sublog of elements, we can now reconcile that back to the music scheduler, so we don't lose track of what we're doing based on you had to be in the log. We also, of course, incorporate how much of it's played before we consider it played. So you had to exceed 50%, 70%. That's a user settable field. Then we'll consider that element as played. But that way, if you do have, this is a big thing for a lot of stations, prohibited, which you can do, you can prohibit jocks' rights to put spots in hotkeys, because it was, in theory, a way for them to play commercials without having it be logged. So back in the days of payola, it would have been a concern. Well, now we can track the stuff that gets played there just every bit as well. And here's what it looks like. You see a little, I've highlighted the area, but for on the hotkeys element there, I just simply select either Audition to force it out the Audition channel, or on air. We now then log that as playing elements whenever you play from that hotkey. It was Zeta, unlike NextGen, you can have multiple pages open at the same point in time. So if I want to have an Audition page, same page if I want, like I got here, but I can have different pages. I can, hey, this is where I listen, this is where I play to air. You can architect it that way. Same thing is true with the Z player down the bottom left, and the stacks player, where again you just hit that where it says on air, toggle, it'll go back to that first Audition state. So let's say count it or don't count it. And we can, by the way, rights prohibit the ability of the talent to change that. So they can't. Perhaps we always are counting it on air, so be careful what you play from hotkeys. Automatic log sync and site rep allows, well, basically it's one of the challenges was, what if I'm doing work on a log, especially somebody massaging a log, an MD, he may be taking his time, get a phone call or whatever. So do we let that thing stand? So he's made changes and he hasn't hit save yet. What do you do? Well, we can now, we've got a timeout factor where we can say, okay, if you haven't hit save at this time, go ahead and propagate those changes out to other sites. Because if you're working on one of those other sites and you happen to be working in the right hour, do you want to just let it sit there and perhaps let time expire your change? And so now we can cover that fact, so that somebody who gets an extended editing session or whatever, we don't have to forego all the changes that you made because you didn't hit save yet. One of the things that in site rep that isn't probably blatantly obvious even though you're replicating the log, what you aren't replicating is real-time control of that log. So you can see here, I can see what's playing on the log in SiteRep, but that play item, or play symbol I see up at the top there, on the highlighted item, is just a symbol. It's not a control. I do not have start-stop control in real time for that station with SiteRep alone. We do have components like Zeta to Go to allow you real-time control of that station from afar, but it's not part of SiteRep. And the reason we did that is, again, because once you start figuring out the dynamics of how fast your transportation layers are, it's really hard to guarantee performance. So we elected at this point to say, nah, not yet. Some new waveform or new audio formats being supported here. Boy, if what you're using ain't on this list, I don't know what the heck. One other thing to take notice is while we've got these new audio formats, we allow you to play them back. We don't allow you necessarily to convert to them because that may require rights for codecs to be able to have the license to use. So we can play them. That's usually free, but if you want to encode to them, that's usually not so free. We do support some of them. You can see that down below here that we can convert. We can convert to and from PCM, MPEG, MPEG-3, and AAC here. And we'll be supporting it in our multi-track editor too, an integrated multi-track component here. And I think, a lot of people use Audition these days, but I think Audition converts everything to PCM to work anyhow. And with that in mind, we now also provide you, because you can now have so many different formats supported, we want you to be able to know from your browsing grid, saying, okay, what if I just want to know how many AAC files I have in my system? You can now make that a category type. We tell you what kind of file it was by examining it, but you couldn't necessarily have a nice grid, so if I wanted to sort by all my MP3s, I can. And then we also added some, the ability to create custom fields for you. So if I want to create, my favorite is the cowbell field. So what's the cowbell rating on this song? Is it any? No, 0? Or 5, like this is Don't Fear the Reaper or something like that. That's a 5. And I can present that, and of course use that in looking up elements too. Zeta to Go is going to have the new auditioning capabilities. We can do drag and drops now from browsers and manipulate logs that way. We'll be able to add new assets from Zeta, which is a pretty cool thing. You could always do voice tracks, but adding a full asset was not something you couldn't do before. You'll be able to do that now. This year, not quite out yet, but it's coming really, really soon. And doing station activations, which that ties back into that SiteRep. As soon as I make something active for that station, that taps the SiteRep button to say, go get it. And here you just see kind of the examples of the two things I just talked about, what they look like in the Zeta to Go world. And let's see, GPI, we added new broadcast tools, came out with a 16.2, which is kind of a newer version of the 8.2 that a lot of people use, so we've got that supported now. Splits behavior is kind of like doing ad insertion. So if you want to, everything's the same except the commercials. That's our splits module, and we allow you to control that behavior from library screens. Let's see, log, factor, and spotlight links, all kind of log, kind of housekeeping, keeping kind of stuff there. And then searching for items on the log. This is one of those that I was kind of surprised that it wasn't in there. But then again, if you think about it, I don't know a lot of systems that have this ability. I want to search the log, not the system, but the log, for when did this say live read. Just don't give me a search field to just find it in the log. And couldn't believe it wasn't in there. This is a great ad. I can definitely see the application in that. So that's coming. FTP options, so that we make sure that we only load a piece of audio if it's newer, as opposed to just cyclically bring it in and replace. Now playing export. Remember that new ID field where we can do a custom type? I can now also export that. So if for whatever reason, if I wanted a fake view meter on my billboard that's a cowbell, I could drive that because I can output my custom field. Some new reports changes on things, being able to see when, when we put kill dates or race dates on stuff, and it's all assumed that the overnight routines will take care of that, which they do. But when I look at a report and I see that spot or song or whatever went away, and it was done by the overnight routines, that didn't used to be tracked because you told it in the first place to have the system do it. Well, now the system logs itself and going, okay, yeah, we'll tell you, by the way, all the stuff that we did for you on your behalf automatically. And implementing a pitch override. So if I'm pitching my music 2%, except for this one thing, I can now easily, on a per element level, say this one doesn't get to fall, or it has an exception to that rule. Our stacks, we can now see status items. I guess I don't have a picture of that one, but it just tells you what things have been played. Again, these are for kind of asynchronous log elements. User rights, allowing them to modify their own preferences. G-selector integration, supports for new, some of the things a PD or an MD would use, syncing between Zeta and G. So if they change a mood code, which Chris, I love these words that the MDs use, you want to be have that reflect in Zeta as well too. So it's all there. That syncs up for you. And big one down at the bottom, and I should have highlighted that in red. This is something that a lot of people have asked for. Is I want my music scheduler to pick my film stuff for my automation. Usually the traditional approach is overschedule your hour, you'll be good. What if something happens and that just you couldn't see it coming, and now all of a sudden I got to get music that I didn't have scheduled? Zeta can now tap G-Select and say, hey, looking at our format rules, please give me some film material, and in turn fill out that hour. And Zeta go, we can do drag. It almost looks like a loop. Did I get the slide in here before? Where we can still do drag and drop for the library and attach and be able to look. Yeah, I think that must be a second slide. I apologize for that. And then finally, the last items coming up here, and then Q3 or later, is we'll be able to have hotkeys play locally. So if you have your iPad, if you have your laptop or whatever, and I want to bring it to a mixer on site and not have the station play that audio, but I want to come out my local device, even your iPhone, you can do that. It can be very handy for remotes. Import support for, we are adding some functionality to Zcast here to deal with rotations and stuff for spots, kind of mundane type of things. VSTs are coming, which is kind of cool for our playout sequencer and and I think it will be coming here for our multi-track editor. But key thing on playout is we're seeing a lot of traction streaming out to the web, and people want to be able to add some processing by VSTs directly at the playout source, and we'll be able to do that soon. Or perhaps even encode to shoutcast or icecast directly within the playout. Create notifications, so that right now Zeta really has very limited, we do screen notifications, but that is coming so that we'll be able to send notifications out to SNMP and various other formats, and you can have some alternate notification schema. And what other big ones here that jumping out here and running out of time. Oh, yeah, one of the neat things that if I do some background recording, and right now with Zeta I have to say, by the way, you're going to record, rush hour 3, the rush show hour number 3 or something. I had to predefine that and say, by the way, here's the cart number I want you to record to. I can't just say, create a new number, go get me a new number, go create this for the first time ever. You had to predefine where it was going to land to. It's going to be able to create its own rotations, its own spot number rotations now coming forward. So that's kind of, NextGen's actually been able to do that. It's the feature still coming from Zeta. So Zeta's still growing very much today, but it's still, feature-wise, it's an incredible software package. And that's really, that ends up being pretty close to where I wanted to be. But anything I'll try and clear out here, because I think they're going to have the 1 o'clock SBE thing. I told them I would be way out of the way for that. I'll tear down here, and then if you have any questions, I'll take them off the side, I guess. So, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.